him as the director of operations, perhaps. He would have somebody else designated as the chief pilot. That certificate would be in Wichita.
Well, I don't think you could be the director of operations in these remote.
Where does it say?
Yeah, we'll get into this in just a second. Just so that we don't spend an inordinate amount of time. One of the problems with 135 is it does not require the management officials to be full-time employees. Some people believe that this somehow allows an individual, and in fact, I have one individual that has shown up on 178 certificates. Now, this individual is the director of maintenance, director of ops, chief pilot, agent for service, vice president, president. Even if we look at the idea that this individual, I keep hoping he shows up was going to show up to one of our seminars, because I wondered how he was able to conduct all these operations as such. But one of the things that clearly the rule did not consider was the fact of this part-time business was the size and the scope that 135 has necessarily accomplished, the business practices that it's doing, and the sense is that I think if we really asked and looked at the system that the individual had put forth, their operational control system could not do that. Scattered satellite operations aside, could not have accomplished that. But with that said, I wrote that down. We'll talk about that.
If we don't fully answer a question,
Yeah.
we are taking them down. They will be more fully responded to, because although we'd like to be like the Shell answer man of past advertising campaigns, some things we can't answer spontaneously. We have to do some additional digging and research.
This idea of multiple certificates and whatever, we have seen aspects of it. A corporate entity just buys one. They just go in and buy another one. They lose this one in St. Louis and they go to Birmingham. They buy another one. They take some little 135 single pilot operation and basically buy it out and then start adding aircraft to it.
By the way, it doesn't directly address your question, but it's just to what Kent's alluding to. We've noticed that there are at least 50 dormant certificates out there, and what happens is if folks are not conducting their operations and that certificate is dormant, we should collect those certificates. They either should be surrendered or we should go out with a notice of proposed revocation, unless there's a reasonable likelihood that they'd start up, and then we could go emergency. However, while those certificates are just sitting out there for whatever reason, these bad guys, when they lose one, they just go and try to buy that other certificate. And although a certificate is not an asset, if you buy the stock in the company, you in essence bought the certificate, and then you could start up your miserable operations once again. So that part of the equation is something that FAA flight standards can deal with. We just have to get on with collecting those dormant certificates. Will that solve every problem? No, but it will solve an important issue. Yeah.
Definition of a dormant certificate would freeze.
I'd like to say I've memorized part 119, but I haven't. There's something with respect to having conducted operations within X number of days.
Now we have one that does all the training, has their flighting on the certificate, keeps it within 135 specifications. However, they have not done a 135 flight in the last 3.5 years. Probably do not intend to do one, but they need their certificate 135 certificate in order to continue their business with the
Forest Service,
federal government and Forest Service.
Well, that's a little different. You know, you'd like to say one size fits all, and to a great degree, certain things run true. But I do know Forest Service and maybe some other federal agencies have that type of requirement. But if in fact your certificate holder did not fall into that category, we should take his certificate. In this case, you treat it on a case by case. I wouldn't do it. There is some prosecutorial discretion there.
Yes.
I'm John Beck, and I can answer the previous gentleman's question. 8400.10 revision 42, which came out in May, specifies criteria for determining the certificate holding district office, and it no longer is based on the principal base of operations, but it considers also the location of the management personnel and the maintenance base for maintenance selection. So therefore, that person can't create a certificate in one disto and then enable somebody in a different district to use it.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions? Going once, twice, sold. That's good. I thought there would be more.
Why don't we take 10 minutes, come back, and we'll finish up the day. Okay, let's go ahead and finish this up. Get moving along. I know the audiovisual people are wanting us to finish up, just like we want to finish up. All right, we've gone all this time. I just want to go over, for a quick review, for those that may have missed it, quickly what a lessor and a lessee is. We're fast approaching saying operational control 552 times, so we're almost at the end. We know the lessor is a person that conveys property to a lease. A lessee is a person that holds the property under a lease. We know we discovered what a wet lease was. We also know that a wet lease does not include code-sharing arrangements. Okay. We also know that the rule requires that prior to conducting operations involving a wet lease, each certificate holder shall, that's what the current rule talks about, provide the administrator with a copy of the wet lease, and then the administrator determines which party of the agreement has operational control. By the way, the lessor provides this information by regulation. We know that a certificate holder may not wet lease from a foreign air carrier, from a foreign person, and more importantly, from any person not authorized to engage in common carriage. We also know what operational control means. If not, we're having a makeup session in St. Louis later this couple of weeks. You can come to that and go through all this again. The key point here is the exercise of authority. We're looking for that infamous word of authority over an operation. I've been asked about, just include this, a differentiation between an indirect air carrier and a direct air carrier. For the most part, indirect air carriers are those people we know as aircraft brokers. They arrange for flights. The big difference between an indirect air carrier and a direct air carrier is the second part of that. First of all, an indirect air carrier means a person who provides or offers to provide air transportation but cannot, like a direct air carrier. A direct air carrier must have control over the operational functions performed in providing that transportation. It must be clear that an indirect air carrier has not somehow moved over into the direct air carrier realm. Obviously, a direct air carrier has a certificate, an indirect does not. May have authorization by DOT to be an indirect air carrier or broker. It's not authorization by us to conduct operations. We also know that for the most part, operational control deals with knowledge, when you know something, and also the fact that you have to perform these actions on a daily basis, whatever. We did talk about the difference between operational control and the responsibility and authority of the pilot in command. Is there a difference? Yes, there is. May the PIC exercise operational control? Yes, as an agent for the certificate holder. Okay? Can operational control be delegated? Yes or no? Well, only one person or an entity can exercise operational control. Certainly the functions can be delegated to the agents, but the carrier always retains operational control. It is vested in the certificate holder and no one else. Certificate holder in the form of a management personnel. Some of the things that the certificate holder must do, obviously they have to ensure that they alone conduct the operations, ensure that it alone conducts the operations authorized by the OpSpecs, ensure that only its crew members or its agents who are acting as crew members are trained and qualified. You know, you'd say, well, yeah, of course, Kent. Not so. A lot of these folks come qualified from 142, not necessarily trained under the auspices of the certificate holders training program. Obviously, prior to initiation of the flight, you have to know the identity of each crew member. Well, yeah, but you know what? It doesn't always happen. Certificate holders tell us that many a times the identity of the people flying the aircraft aren't known until after the flight. Guess what you'll see later. The Part 135 operator must affirmatively determine the crew member is qualified. That just doesn't mean the infamous list on the wall. Okay? I asked that question of some folks. I said, how do you determine that? They said, well, we have a list on the wall. I said, well, could I write my name on there? Maybe I can be one here. Anyway, they have to obviously designate the pilot in command. Pilots don't do that. Ensure that all of its crew members. I do know that some 135 operators use people in capacities. They don't call them flight attendants. Sometimes they put them on there to serve meals, whatever. And they say, well, they're not really flight attendants. They're not really this or that. The reality is that anybody who is being paid by the certificate holder to be on an aircraft, while they may not meet the requirements of a true crew member, as a minimum should know safety-related issues, certainly how to open the door on an aircraft. By the way, they couldn't get the door open on the Teterboro airplane. There's questions as to what the flight attendant or the person on that aircraft was on there for. Ensure that the aircraft is airworthy. That's not the responsibility of the PIC. It's up to the on the actions of the 135 operator. And so forth and so on. Ensure that the safety conditions specified for a flight, when they can't be met, that the flight is canceled, delayed, rerouted, or diverted. Obviously, the carrier is going to rely heavily on the PIC mechanics, their agents, to make assessments to advise them what should be done. Obviously, the difference here is that the pilot in command clearly is directly responsible for and is the final authority as to the operation of the aircraft, not for the exercise of operational control, but the operation of the aircraft. Obviously, a PIC can deviate from any rule to the extent required to meet an emergency, but what do we say in the rule? If we ask, you've got to tell us why you did it. It isn't just, I can do anything I want whenever. We did talk about DBAs, or fictitious business names. Clearly, the addition of an aircraft owner's or management company or LLC or whatever, or close likeness to the name, does not constitute authorization by the FAA for that aircraft owner, management company, LLC, whatever, to conduct business as if they were the air carrier. Obviously, DBAs should be looked at closely because they do have a potential to create confusion as to who is actually exercising operational control. And we know that it is us, in the form of FAA inspectors, who authorize these on OpSpec A001. If you want more information about the use of DBA names, there was a pretty good discussion of this on DBAs in 8483, even though I said earlier this was out of, technically ran out in June. The information is still applicable, and you'll see it once again in the OpSpecs. I want to briefly talk about the Dear Air Carrier letter. This was an attempt of what we, at first, when we were trying to get our arms around what was actually happening in the industry, 130 air carriers were picked, not necessarily at random, but they received from the director a Dear Air Carrier letter, and in this process we said to him, would you please explain to us how you operate, what you do, give us some background information. Some of your operators may have, in fact, been in this infamous 130 list. Well, what did we find out? Well, we found out some interesting things. First of all, we found out that lease agreements, management agreements, contracts vary from single pieces of paper to telephone-sized book. Some look like they they were lease agreements for apartments more than airplanes. Some were done professionally by $500 an hour attorneys, others that look like, you too can be a lawyer.com, kind of thing that they had put together as such. There was no rhyme or reason as to what any of these agreements look like or any sort of standard language as such. It was all over the map. We saw several, it was not unusual to find the same aircraft on multiple op specs. This obviously started raising questions about whose maintenance, inspection, program, AAIP, whatever you want to call it, their approved program, which one were they following? And did what PMI know any information or about the fact that this airplane was sitting on another set of op specs? Because I will tell you, they didn't in most cases because they hadn't asked. So guess what you're going to have to do in the future? Before you add an airplane to the op specs, guess what's the first question you're going to say to them? Does this plane reside on anybody else's op specs? And if it does, why are you putting it on this op spec? We want an answer to that question. Well, we're trying to hide the fact that the other office is about to shut down the airplane because it's up against a hard time. And as soon as we're trying to hurry and get the plane moved on to another certificate. There are many reasons why the same aircraft will show up on multiple op specs. The leading, right now, the leader is one aircraft shows up on 7 different certificates. Some of it may be due to administrative error. Even if it is, these questions need to be asked. We also found, as I alluded to earlier, the same management official. This was the feedback from the steerer carrier letter. The same management officials were on multiple op specs. The all-time leader was, as most of you have heard, one individual showed up 178 times. Guess what? The next question you're going to be, you're not required, but you'll ask that management official, do you show up on anybody else's op spec? Are you a management official with any other 135, 121 operators? We're actually going to ask that question and see what they have to say. Clearly, some of the information that we found, by the way, management officials within 135 have clearly taken advantage of the fact that it is not a full-time position. They have clearly taken advantage of that. I have talked about changing that rule. And as anybody who's dealt with rulemaking, you have to get on the list, you have to get a priority, you have to show that there's depth. The point is that I think we can start to identify, and certainly the message to everyone here, is that let's look at what these management people are actually doing. Are they truly exercising operational control? Is there all sorts of, is it just a scam? There's clearly a misunderstanding of what operational control was. Anybody believe it has that it's dispatch, flight following? If there is, there's a makeup session. See. I already talked about the Federal Register notice. Very good information there. You will see that our proposed policy was that if we had any indication an airplane was located, if an aircraft was on a certificate or was being requested to be put on a certificate where there was an illegal wet lease, an aircraft would be immediately removed from the op specs, or it would not be allowed on the op specs. We've already made that statement in our Federal Register notice to the public. So all the aviation attorneys for the operators are aware that we're looking for illegal wet leases. Difficult task because, as Doug mentioned to you, there could in fact show up one pilot and an aircraft from an aircraft owner. The difficult part will be ascertaining whether or not that certificate holder or that owner provided the pilot. Yes, a difficult problem for some of you to review, especially when you do see owners' pilots coming with the aircraft. How can that not be an illegal wet lease? As I alluded to, the air ambulance special emphasis will continue for obvious reasons, and it will probably be expanded into other kinds of 135 operations. I want to briefly touch on this group that Alan and Doug alluded to. We did meet. Our group was called the Operational Control and Wet Lease Policy Guidance Working Group. And I think the acronym is OC something, and our, whatever it was, I don't know, the acronym was about this long. Anyway, went over 2 days. We looked at this idea that there were primary tenets of operational control. Crew, aircraft, I think the industry called it a legal crew, a legal aircraft, legal passengers, that's an interesting, and a legal flight. We took a lot of information from what they had told us about those 4 tenets of the idea of the crew, the aircraft, the passengers, and flight. And you'll see this in the aspect that we're going to cover here shortly. The control authorization process, they felt that clearly there should be procedures where air carriers control and then where owners control. And that they felt this needed to be in OPSPECs or something somewhere, that there had to be a differentiation here. It could not be left to guessing. They also, it was interesting, they wanted an operational control briefing and acknowledgement. They basically wanted a crew member to stand up in front of, their recommendation was, you have the first officer stand up in front of the group and say, this flight is about to be operated under Part 135. And I guess all the passengers would say, well, thank goodness it's not 134, you know, I guess. They do that, and it's not, I don't mean to make fun. This is actually done at 91K. The first officer, or whoever, pilot maybe, stands up in front of the group and says, this flight is being operated at 91K. I will make a bet that 99.99% of the passengers don't have a clue what that means, but it's to advise passengers that this is not a 135 flight, it's not a 91 flight, but it's a 91K flight versus a 91J flight. Anyway, they also felt that all flight crew members should be direct employees or agents for the certificate holder. They also felt that we needed to prescribe certain responsibility, knowledge, and leverage requirements over the flight crew. They also said that we needed to provide guidance on charter management use agreements and actions by the certificate holder once they discovered unauthorized commercial use of the aircraft or an illegal 135. They actually proposed to have the aircraft removed from the OPSPECs. They said, we think you should have a requirement that as soon as we find out an illegal 135 is taking place under the auspices of my certificate, that aircraft should come off, and that they would be required to notify the FAA that somebody was doing this. And I said, well, if I'm going to be held accountable for somebody else's illegal actions, I think I would say something. So with that said, we got the group together and they made all these recommendations. And from that, did you call it a pointy-headed bureaucrat in Washington that came up with that, Alan? What was the...
I don't know.
What was the term?
Derogatory.
So, yes, we did sit down, we looked through the issues and the recommendations that the group gave us, and it turned into the A008 that you have before you. So with no further ado, today's reading will come. You should have a copy of A008. Now, you probably have one that shows delete and all out to the margins. That shows me that, well, obviously you can see how many times the document has been changed. If you ever run across that, that shows me that, you know, when flight standards changed over, when it changed over from the old Windows 2000 to the Windows XP, your document showed up and looked like this. It was all red, and even out to the side it had, well, all you have to do is, that means it was shown under, this is like Microsoft Word 101. All you need to do is just go to Final, and it removes all that. Anyway, and you have to print it that way. But let's go over what it says. Basically, the A008, we start out with a note, again, the significance of the word agent or agents as used in these OPSPECs is that the certificate holder is the principal. All the lawyers in the crowd know what I'm talking about. is the principal, and the certificate holder is accountable and liable for the acts or omissions of each of its agents. We figured that we would start out with a note right away and make it clear that these folks that are using your agents, you're accountable for as such. You'll hear that theme all the way through. Also, the current A and the proposed paragraph A are indeed similar. In fact, it did not tell you in the actual paragraph that you were supposed to insert a GOM reference. I think this, we decided that instead of them actually spelling it out on the OPSPEC, that we would allow them to put down the specific procedures in their GOM, but we want a reference to where the GOM, we want a GOM reference for this. I suspect that there will be several references, I would hope. Anyway, the system described or referenced in, and then they have to insert the GOM, shall be used by the certificate holder to provide operational control of its flight operations. Should I see any more flight locating procedures in there? No. It's a small element of operational control. All right, then we decided, let's spell out right up front certificate holder responsibilities and prohibitions. So, responsibilities. Certificate holder retains all responsibility for the operational control of aircraft operations conducted under the certificate and OPSPECs, including the actions or inactions of all direct employees and agents of the certificate holder. The responsibility is not transferable to any other person or entity, and it is the responsibility, the certificate holder's responsibility for operational control supersedes any agreement, contract, understanding, arrangement, either oral or written, expressed or implied, between any persons or entities. This should be pretty straightforward. Who is in control? The certificate holder. Okay? Now, what is a certificate holder prohibited from doing? The certificate holder may not engage in any of the following practices: the franchising or sharing of the certificate holder's authority for the conduct of operations under its certificate and OPSPECs to or with any person or entity. Any question about what franchising means, or sharing, or piggybacking, or any of that? You've heard that go all day. They may not use a doing business as name in any way that represents an entity that does not hold an air carrier or operating certificate and OPSPECs as having such a certificate and OPSPECs. I can tell you there are quite a few 121 folks that can't meet that right now. They are using a DBA that is not them. It is another entity. That is one of the prohibitions. You may not be allowed to use the DBA. We will not authorize the DBA. In addition, you may not engage in a wet lease contrary to 11953. We don't need to go over that. Even though I say we don't, we go into it in the fact that in accordance with 11953B, the certificate holder may not wet lease from or enter into any wet leasing arrangement with any person not authorized by the FAA to engage in common carriage under Parts 121, where that person provides an aircraft and at least one crew member to the certificate holder. Now, let me stop right there and just say a couple of things about these OPSPECs. First of all, one of the things that we had to do, it seemed, both FAA attorneys and FAA inspectors were having to review lease agreements. And I guarantee you, I was keeping at least 3 FAA attorneys busy reviewing enough lease agreements to keep everybody busy. One of the aspects of, one of the tenets of these OPSPECs is that we don't want you to automatically, there is no need to review every single lease agreement. You may have to review a lease agreement for certain aspects, but that is not a requirement. It will not be a requirement that you must review every single lease agreement, read every single lease agreement. The way we couch these prohibitions and requirements was so that the operator is making that, what's the term, they're making that to you, I have done this, and I want this airplane on the OPSPECs, and I'm meeting all these requirements. It's obviously going to be up to you to verify the information. The extent of that verification will rest with the principal inspectors. And I like what Alan said, and I want to reemphasize. Nothing here that we've said, even though we focused on pilots and who pays the pilots, was to preclude the fact that the airworthiness program is somehow not important in these issues. It is extremely important. In fact, when I had the folks in 300 look over these op specs, you'll see later where they actually introduced some verbiage in here to discuss this issue of maintaining airworthy airplanes and what happens if it doesn't. Let me return to the op specs. So we go into, this next part is not necessarily a prohibition, but rather we like to, since there was some question, if you remember, the group said, and I know you can't read that, so that's why you each have a copy of this. You should describe lease agreements or management agreements and whatever. So we thought this would answer that question. We say that a lease or other business arrangement with a lease is considered a wet lease if any of the following conditions exist. So again, we've tried to spell out in plain language what an illegal wet lease is. And some of the provisions that if it contains any of those, then it's considered an illegal wet lease, and the FAA will not put an aircraft on the op specs under an illegal wet lease. If the aircraft owner does not agree to provide any crew member with the leased aircraft to the certificate holder may independently contract with pilots who also happen to work as pilots for the aircraft owner. This is that part, I won't go over it again, but it's what Doug talked about, see from the slide 23. This is the way they could actually get those pilots. Let's face it, some of those pilots have years and years of experience, and the industry said to us, look, we don't want the operators 1,500-hour pilots, we want our 10,000-hour pilots. And it appeared that they were vetoing any pilot that didn't have 10,000 hours. Well, guess which pilots in the room had 10,000 hours? Their pilots. So to us it said, it looked like you were trying to basically influence the certificate holder in